Good morning, everyone. Good to have you again. We have folks here in the center. Jim Franklin and Tiffany Richardson are with me, and we're about to embark on session 3 of the incubator support activity. The session today is has been designed is to explore product definition, and it starts the process of market viability. And so we're going to talk about a lot of material around how to make sure your products or technologies have features and benefits that will appeal to a customer base, that you avoid the major mistake of developing something that customers either don't want or enough customers don't want in order to make your venture commercially viable. And then we'll finish with starting down the path of identifying actual numbers with addressable and available markets. We'll do most of that next week, but remember, the direction here will be an attempt to define your target market so that you can actually start to put numbers on the sales projections that Jim has laid out in the financial model from the first week. And then we'll cover that. It's a lot of material, but I want you to remember a couple of things. This is designed to assist you with your product or your service development in order to determine a target market and a customer experience that will allow you to generate revenue in order to have a commercially viable venture or to grow your current venture. And along the way, we will learn cost, so that as you walk through this process, you'll start to identify things that are costs that will end up on that first year projection and eventually be projected into the 5-year model that Jim has set aside for you. It's a lot of material, so I'm going to go back to a tried and simple activity as you try and look at the various things. I think this is probably a methodology all of you are familiar with. It's called SMART goals. It's a way to look at a problem or look at an issue as you confront it, get specific about it, see how you can measure it, how you might achieve it, and then you put a time frame on it. So there's no magic here. I think most of you have probably been exposed to it, but if the information becomes a little overwhelming, don't forget you have your consultants to talk to, but you can also fall back on this pretty simple goal setting methodology in order to get yourself in working order again. So with that, we're off. I don't get overwhelming on product and service definitions. For me, a product or a service, I'll use those terms synonymously as we move throughout this, is something that will serve a customer need or want. It can be tangible, it can be products, it can be a place, it can be any number of things. We have a whole new virtual world developing that people are finding ways to make money at. But every product and service is made at a cost. And as you walk through this process, I want you to start thinking about what the costs are that you're incurring, because we can build that into your first year projection. And then, of course, every product or service can be sold at a price. And as we walk through target marketing and then pricing strategies next week, we should be able to start coming up with some revenue numbers that we can put into the first year projection and then ultimately the 5-year model that Jim has built for you. We have product and technology planning. Once again, I think I've answered the mail here in terms of the map, but in the end, product planning, I want you all to have your own vision. It starts there. You certainly have some idea as to why you have undertaken this venture. Some of you have businesses that are in process and you are selling products and services, but your vision is important, and so is your product strategy. The curriculum requires us to give you a roadmap, and I'll show you how that's done. And ultimately, though, that 4th box is what's most important. As you come up with your product and services, you will come up with cost and ways that are necessary to produce it, particularly if it's a tangible product. And keep in mind, that's a way for us to start determining what the costs are associated with putting the product or service in place for your business. A product roadmap is a very good way to do this. You start with features and benefits, But it starts there with the vision and what you want to do. This is often a moving target. It's often a moving target when you start engaging actual customers, because they will give you input that you consider relevant. It might help you expand your product or service visit. It might actually help you create additional products and services that your business can also deliver to the current target market or an additional one. You have to be able to execute this. And for me, I like people to break down execution into the product map I'll show you on the next slide, and to time bound it. In other words, let's set a goal and let's make sure you're coming up with a way to track your progress. Milestones are what investors and business planners call this. And keep in mind, this can be a milestone that an investor might use, particularly if they're investing you at a seed or at a prototype stage. They might want you to come up with milestones as to how much it will cost and when you can meet it, and they are likely to hold you to that. So for those of you with new product ideas, keep that in mind. Features are always important. Everybody that does anything with product development will tell you you don't sell a product, you sell its themes and its benefits and all of those sorts of things that meet customer functionality, and they achieve a customer want or goal. And then timeframes are, of course, allow you to make sure that you will be finished at some point and be able to deliver a product or at least a pitch as to what you're up against. And once again, keep in mind, these are milestones that investors will hold you to. And then always there are metrics and measurements that will develop. These will be unique to your individual business, but as you come across how long it takes you to do things and the cost associated with that, metrics and measurements are worth knowing, because they will help you with your management and operations. This is a picture of a product map. You can see here down my left-hand side, it may be some of you to the right, typical milestones. This is a product that's sold through web store, and you can see they want customers to be able to serve themselves. They obviously want to be able to sell on mobile as well through typical websites. They're going to use a web store element. They apparently need a help desk, and they will need various types of infrastructure, databases to capture customer information, websites, those kinds of things. And you can see here at the top, this is the importance of the time bound. When you lay out a product map, you want to determine what you need to do, which is all of this stuff in this multicolored elements, but you want to set yourself a time frame to get them done, because then costs can be applied to that, resources can be applied to that, and you can be very effective in talking to individuals, giving directions to employees or vendors, and then ultimately telling an investor why you may need money in order to be able to prove that. This is not one that you have to use. You can develop it any way you want, but I do think it's worth making sure you have this left-hand column in terms of all of the things you would like to accomplish. And then across the top, make sure you establish a time frame, so you're setting goals for yourself to actually get things done and things are not languishing. Yes, ma'am.
What software was this chart made on?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what software this chart was made on?
And I'm sorry, I can't.
What software was this?
Oh,
made on?
oh, gee, that's a great question.
It looks like a canvas.
Not sure.
slide, doesn't it?
Yeah. Canvas.
I think we can do
they're-
Canvas, Miro.
I'm a old engineering guy that used Gantt charts, and I didn't see it as anything more than that. So.
I know it was a Gantt chart. I didn't know what program.
I'll get a history.
Yeah,
There's
thank
the
you.
that's very good.
Microsoft project.
All of those were there.
Microsoft
Yeah,
project.
Smartsheet.
And
Probably the
Dr.
most
Jen has
widely
chimed in
used.
with this. I've had good luck using Excel for Gantt charts and things like that. I like what Dr. Jen, I suspect Smartsheet may be a little bit more robust if you're going to do a product roadmap, but it's
I'll put it in the
a
chat.
very good element. Just keep in mind, independent of what you use, your milestones and timeframes are what's really important in order to make progress with your venture. Go ahead, Jim.
It might be helpful for us to come up with a kind of a template. Everybody uses Excel, so we can do that with product milestones down the left, and then you can make your own time frame with the specific fields across that. I'll take that aboard. We'll see if we can put one
Okay.
out by the
See, and
end
that
of
would
today.
fit what Jim is describing there. So,
Yeah, so you can put your own stuff in there, but it's a good point to define that left column in the parts of your product that are essential. You know, and I might as well say it now. I'm gonna say it in a few minutes, and I'm sure Bill's gonna cover it, but you know, we're talking about hard products and things that are produced. The same sorts of things apply if you are a business that has a service offering. Okay, not necessarily a product, but a service. If you're a consultant, lawyer, accountant, something like that, and your service offering has a lot of components to it. Okay, sorry.
yeah, Jim makes a good point there about service offerings as well. I had this taught to me 3 decades ago. Think of it in its most simplistic. How do you sell insurance? Well, you don't sell insurance, you sell an insurance policy. So often your services will turn into tangible activities that are how you engage your customer and that sort of thing. And actually with the developing virtual world, that can get interesting. Yes, ma'am. Oh, no, I thought you had another question. Gotcha. From the product roadmap, we go to a technology roadmap. This is a 2-step process, as you'll see here in a process, but we are talking about a technology roadmap for commercialization. There's lots of technology, very legitimate stuff down in the world that's knowledge creating and things like that, but may not be a technology that turns into a commercially viable product. So for us, we want the technology commercialization product to be technology into product development and then exploitable for a viable business activity. For many of you with technology ideas, keep in mind the first 2 steps in the technology and product development often involve consideration of intellectual property, and it is very helpful to have at least the makings of a prototype development. Not that investors will not invest at that stage, but it's a very special investor that will. And whenever I'm dealing with a new technology, I always want to make sure that we at least ask the question about protecting it with intellectual property, if that's possible. And having a working prototype gets you a step ahead in terms of being able to develop and exploit a commercial venture. This, for a technology roadmap, I always add the primary marketing research. You want to be meeting a problem, a need, or want. That, of course, is true for all of you. But with technology, this is particularly important because the world of business development is littered with folks who have put together technologies that in the end could not find a viable customer market. So as you develop your technology or your product, I want you to make sure that we're doing some research to validate that there is at least an intuitive, if not some primary engagement with customers to get feedback on its individual development. So just keep in mind that those walk in tandem. Do we have a question?
No, just people offering.
Product roadmap might have been Roadmark. I know that I have used that from time to time. Just ask Dennis there. So I just wanted everybody to have a good example of something that looked relatively simple. So this is a technology roadmap. These get unbelievably complicated. I was telling folks here at the center, I've spent a couple of years of my life, 6 or 7, doing major technological products, and they really do get this involved when you get into the IT elements and things like that. But a technology roadmap still has the same things as your product roadmap. It has all of the things you have to do down the left, and then you want to establish timeframes. Keep in mind, if you're involved with significant technology development, holding people to milestones is critical, or you just keep spending money over and over again, and they can, the world of technology development is littered with overruns in terms of cost if you don't hold and keep working to milestones along those lines. And but product and technology roadmaps can be very, very careful, can be very, very helpful as you make your way through defining the products and services that are going to make up your commercial venture. In the end, once you have that in place, you want to make sure that your product or technology is solving a problem or meeting a need or a want. These are nice little things. There was a gentleman who from Silicon Valley Ventures, fairly famous. His name is Vivad Khosla. He was part of the Sun Microseams management team, a very famous organization when Silicon Valley was developing. They have hence turned into other types of technology firms, but he coined the term, if there's no problem, there's no solution, and there's no reason for a company to exist. So all of that is very straightforward. For this group, we want to make sure as you define your problem and you try to turn it into a commercial advantage, you're always searching for competitive advantage. That can come through differentiation, a distinctive competence or trade secret. Many people will develop what they term a secret sauce. This can be software that's very, very unique and only usable in your product. And of course, we want a customer experience that the market will respond to. And then don't hesitate to think out of the box thinking when you're listening to people. This is a fairly famous quote that's been used from when Henry Ford developed his initial thoughts about cars. He said when he was engaging market, he said and talked to people, what they really wanted was faster horses. He, of course, saw the capability to build a motorized vehicle and then eventually a production system that could allow everyone to have one. So he actually took thought out of the box and came up with actually created a brand new industry that exists to this day. We reviewed last week the Lean Startup. This is part of the methodology of product and service development, and I think we covered that pretty thoroughly. Very, very helpful with technology. It uses the term minimally viable product and gets you to the prototype stage. All of this is to work through a process that manages to commercial viability. And then remember, this magic word that they use called pivot is really trial and error. You will encounter failures along the way and adjust accordingly to it. But I know that we have a couple of people in the class who are already engaged with this type of process, and it's a very, very good one. One other process is the elements of design thinking. They actually think that Steve Jobs made this famous. He had a real way to empathize or to see through what customers might want. He defined that and ideated around ideas like the iPhone and the whole infrastructure that Apple has exploited. He went through prototype development. He would often test it. And then he would come back and do this more and more. These are the crisscrossing lines. You go back and forth with this. There's a lot of data out there on design thinking. It's a very reasonable process, particularly for technology startups. And I didn't want to leave it out along with Lean Startup as one of the principal activities. The one that I wanted to spend some time on with you today is something that can apply to both a product and a service, and that's value proposition design. This also goes by ultimate selling proposition. There are any number of ways to do value proposition design, but you can see its elements here. Its elements are to determine customer needs, wants, and fears, and then make sure that your products has benefits and features that fit this. So you take all of this into account. And when you do value proposition design mechanically, it will force you into a process to go out there and see what customers are doing now or what competition actually exists. And a failure to leave competition or competitive thinking out of your thought is just a major, major failure. I've listened to many folks tell me over the years that there's nothing like what they are putting on the market, and that may be true. But the reality is people are doing something to achieve their goals, their needs and wants, and avoid their fears now. And you have to be knowledgeable of that because that's where they're spending their money. Very, very straightforward process. And I like value proposition design because it helps create a foundation for marketing and sales messaging so you can catch your customers' attention. And so we'll spend a little bit of time on that just to give you a very good understanding of this. And then I've included a YouTube video that's about 20 minutes long at the end of it that you can use a look at yourself, that was put together by an associate of mine. At its core, value proposition design is about listening to customers. We want to precisely define what your customer wants, needs, and fears are. And this is to make sure that your product and service has or create a perception that they can get their jobs or whatever they want to do done in a better style. At its best, I think Jim said this last week and it stuck with me. You want this to be fairly intuitive when you present it to customers, and you want it to be intuitive to be able to show it to investors. It's very, very complicated. There's probably work to be done to make it more simple. You want to deal with their pains and gains. And then at some point, once you do your initial concept, there was a gentleman and actually Eric Rise with Lean Startup who coined this term. You want to get out of the building and you want to engage your market. You want to go talk with some customers. You want to observe, you want to analyze, and you want to interview them in order to make sure that what you are conceiving actually helps them with their needs, fears, and wants. So this is primary marketing research. It's always very helpful. And once again, it works against that natural inclination to show something to 3 or 4 people. They really like it, but you don't know that it has full-scale market potential or that it's something that people will actually pay for. So get out of the building is just a term that Mr. Blanks put in there. And the objective of all of this is to achieve a product market fit that creates a customer experience and generates revenue. And as you walk through this, you'll make various adjustments that should be helpful in expanding your target market potential or making sure that you have a very, very unique product or service to offer the market. This is what it looks like when you start the process and you interview customers. You can see the various tags that I put on this, and the YouTube video expands on this. You're trying to find out what your product can do. Those are the benefits, how it works, so you can define a customer experience. And you want to make sure that you're getting to the point where you know what it feels like to use your product, and you can explain that to a customer in order to get them to purchase. You always want to engage the customer around needs, wants, and fears. As you go through this, there are questions you can ask, like how would you change what your company does? Why would they not buy a product, or something along those lines. But as you go through this process, you'll begin to understand why, the emotional and the rational drivers of why they will purchase a product or service, and why they do what they currently do. So it's also worth asking what they don't like about the current solution. In the YouTube video I give you, there's a gentleman, Subhu Nayar, he's an associate of mine up in Northern Virginia. He never wants you to ask a customer if they would actually use your product and service. He believes that's a self-defeating question. I actually don't necessarily agree with that. I don't have any problem with you asking that question, but he is right about focusing your questions around the benefits and features of your product, so you get an idea of what the customer actually values as you move through it. So that's what you do with a value proposition design. You actually want to interview customers and engage your market. Then you go home and you learn from those interviews. So you want to go back and do the refinements. How did the information you gathered show that the benefit would go away? That will feed into your benefits. What did you learn about how it needs to work? That will feed into your features. And then you will probably walk away with that about how your customer describes using your product. And that will help you create the customer experience and know how ultimately you're going to experience. Sobar actually believes that if you do this with actual or potential customers, they will tell you what to call your product and go from there. I'll leave that for you all to consider because we have some pretty creative people that I already know have named their products, and the product name actually seems pretty creative to me. But that's value proposition design. And as you can see, it's an attempt to walk through an effort that gives you a very good idea of how your product will solve the wants and needs and fears of your customers and turn into the benefits and features that create a customer experience. 10 no's for primary marketing research. Don't believe your own press clippings. I've run into too many people over the years who walk in and they show me a product or a prototype development, and I ask them if they've exposed it to anybody, and they say yes. And they tell me, I said, what was the reaction? They said they loved it. And then I asked them the magic question about how many people does this number? And they say 3 or 4 or 5. Okay, that's not quite enough. Okay. Now, I don't have any trouble with you identifying just a few individuals if you can then do some secondary research and intuitively know that it's a broad market, say women, a demographic profile, or a social media profile. I was talking with Tiffany earlier about personas, but we don't want to believe your own press clippings here. You want to develop some empathy for the folks who will use it. This is Subhar's list here. He says, never ask if your solution will help, just demonstrate to them and ask about the features and what it does. You don't need too many features, so you have to be wary of that. Often people will use design and go through many things. Don't get trendy. Let your customer actually work through this. I don't have any problems with linear processes, but systems thinking, the whole process, your presentation to customers is important here. And then certainly apply creativity, and particularly of those of you with technology products, the standard A/B usability testing can be very, very effective in determining whether a product works and whether or not customers will use it and under what circumstances you might have to make adjustments. Primary and secondary market research now comes into your product development. If you've actually talked with customers, you'll find once you get an idea of the types of customers, you can actually intuitively sort of determine your secondary market research and get out there and define your target market. And with any luck, we should be able to do some market research and put actual numbers on that. That will be important for you to know, because in the end, when we start building the 5-year financial model that Jim put together for you in the first week, we want to be able to put numbers to units, or if you're selling business to business, numbers of contracts. And that's the beginning, along with your pricing number, of how you can actually create revenue projections. Then you want to know these basic things. Are they willing to pay for it? Are you really meeting their need and adding value? And generally, the pricing structure for what you're going to need will come out of doing this primary and secondary research. Most important from my standpoint is this will teach you how to reach your customers. They will begin to tell you how they would find this. For many of you selling business to business or business to government, this may be direct selling where you need a sales force. But for many of you, you may use social media or other means of advertising in order to drive people to a store, to a website, to shows and things like that, where you will sell your products and services and do that. I always like people to walk through this process and think about eliminating, reducing, raising new features or things like that, or creating new things that will offer differentiation for your product, and then use all of that with secondary market research. And as you get involved with your consultants, and here at the SBDC, often we have access to a number of secondary market research databases that might help you start to actually put dollars and cents on your on the products and services that you intend to offer and that you settle on.
So Bill, before you
Sure.
move on,
Sure.
could you real quickly just give us a sentence or two about the difference between primary and secondary research?
Yes.
What do you mean?
Yeah, for me, primary marketing research is when you actually get out there, and of course you can hire people to do this as well, but you actually get out there because in your product vision, you have an idea of the types of people that will use this and you engage them directly about the features and benefits that you will use. Secondary market research is you have defined your target market perhaps, or you have an idea around that and you actually engage Google research. There are lots of industry businesses that can help you understand what your actual market potential is in terms of dollars, units sold, those sorts of things. So secondary market research is out there already.
So the way that investors look at market research, primary market research is of the most value because it is what we call direct contact research. You can quantify human beings against what you're trying to prove in a sort of social science thing. Secondary market research is publications, and we have rooms full of analysts who already have that based on industry and everything. What Bill's talking about is how do you take that documents research or the library of information and apply it to your product to put value to it.
Yeah, see, I think that's perfect what Jim said. You know, I use the term customer traction for primary research so that you've actually engaged that. And the other point Jim's making, secondary market research is out there and can be had. It sort of gets your arm around the market, and you saw in the template that Jim laid out. Investors like you to take them through. At the end of this presentation, you're going to see total addressable market, things like that. This is how big the market is. This is how big your portion of it. This is what you can get of it. That's one of the ways that you get down into a valid and believable financial projection. So you start at the top. And later on in the slides, I actually have a picture of a overall market, secondary research, and then how it breaks into segments. So I'll give you a picture of what Jim just talked to you about. I'll give you a couple examples of how BPD is used, value proposition design. A couple of firms that you know about, one you probably know about, but you haven't heard of, but I think almost everybody online has heard of Airbnb. You might be surprised that very early in their, they went about a year and a half, and they were having a real problem finding customers. They had the technology built to be able to go that, but they just weren't experiencing very much customer traction or growth. They had spent a lot of time with developing charts and graphs, and they of course had developed their technology. Well, what they did, two of the original founders, they finally engaged customers. They actually used their app and went out, and they went to New York City and went out and met just literally hundreds of people. And they were able to find out that most people told them the reason I wouldn't book on this site is because your pictures look terrible. They were just allowing the folks selling their own elements to put pictures on Airbnb, and apparently it didn't look very professional. So they spent time with their customers actually improving amateur photos to professional ones, and lo and behold, sales began to increase almost dramatically. So that's the engagement, the primary engagement that Jim and I were talking about earlier. And if you don't know Airbnb, I think Jim would point this out and he'd be correct. They're still not quite profitable, but they have a very large market capitalization, and obviously they haven't had any trouble raising money, and they are projected to reach profitability. But an excellent stage, and a firm I think everybody can reference for, and they found themselves early with what was clearly a very, very viable technology, as we now know, having problem gaining customer traction. Another firm that used value proposition design, they actually used a marketing firm that specializes in this, that I think everybody's familiar with, is is Uber Eats. They actually have built this in to their whole marketing element, but they seek out and sought out from the start customer experiences. They call their program, I believe it's in here, yeah, their walkabout program. They actually make their executives go out into cities and learn about how people might deliver what the restaurant industry wants from Uber Debates. And they kind of, I guess, knowing the food culture applies to that, although at this point, Uber Eats will deliver everything from McDonald's to a 5-star meal. So they take this and do rapid field testing, and then they take it back and implement it into their customer experience and their whole product design. And obviously, we know Uber Eats found a significant growth path. They last time I looked at their last quarter and putting this slide together. They're about $8.3 billion in revenue. So obviously, a very, very good idea that keeps reinvesting in what their customers want through primary research. And then, as Jim said, of course, now they have history, so they can really leverage secondary market research based on their historical performance in the market. You may not be familiar with Oral-B electric toothbrushes, but it's a Procter & Gamble brand. This is a good example of when they were trying to design the electric toothbrush. And when you read the history of this, P&G had all of its folks, because Procter & Gamble has a pretty good history with product development, but they were thinking of all sorts of things for the electric toothbrush, music players and all sorts of things, brushing every single teeth, all sorts of things along those lines. They hired a firm called Cullen & Heck, who uses value proposition design, and they simply got out and started talking to customers. And in the end, customers just wanted a few simple things with an electric brush, USB charging so it could be consistently charged. And they wanted to be able to order it and be able to get replacement brush heads. And they implemented that. And of course, Oral-B is a significant player in this market. But Cullen & Heck made the point of engaging the market directly through value proposition design and finding the actual benefits and things that customers and features that the customers actually wanted, rather than sitting back in the towers of Procter & Gamble and hoping the folks around the table figured that out. And in this case, of course, this is a very significant product for Procter & Gamble, and just shows another way that value proposition design can be used. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Questions? You bet.
So in terms of primary and secondary research, market research, how do you do that if you are creating something by hand and you have a very niche market?
If you have a very niche product, it should have a target market that can be defined, and that can be a demographic profile. I like our discussion earlier. If you're doing this on the web, you can actually build a persona of the type of people that can identify you. And once you have that persona built, break it down into a demographic profile, gender, income, any number of elements. You said earlier psychographics, which can be interesting if it turns out that there's something really unique about the mental framework of people who buy your product. And we should be able to put a number on that.
So how do you do
that's
the
what you're doing.
secondary market research?
Well, I would do that, but I would do the persona. I would then go find some of those customers and expose your product and service to them, and then bring the secondary market research to bear so that you could put actual numbers on it. So even a niche market ought to have a target market that that your product or service will apply to, that can be definable, so that we can put numbers on it and build a revenue projection from it.
She just got a.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I have a little survey, because like when you're doing the transaction, because we both do like in-person events, so it's on the back of my little thank you card. And I just asked them, it's like, which earring design do you prefer? Simple,
But
trendy?
Isn't that first?
I mean, it's
And not secondary, because I thought secondary market research was publications, the industry data,
It is,
things like
but
that.
her primary research goes throughout product development.
Yeah, because so we're kind of always doing both
Right.
kind of simultaneously. So then I can follow that up with looking at the demographics of through like an IBS report or an online database of like when I go to a market, who's there. So I know
Right.
like which products are more likely to sell because of the price point, or am I somewhere that's a more urban area where things might be more trendy, or am I somewhere where I need more classical or more fine jewelry type things? So I'm kind of doing both. And then they just kind of, they're giving me the upfront kind of perspective, but then with the data, I can confirm it based on what they're seeing and what they're picking up. And then it's all suit a lot for us, it's observation.
Right.
Another way to think about secondary market research is imagine yourself sitting in a room with a bunch of jerks like me, and you give me your primary research with your customers. And I look at you and say, that's not your market. And you go, well, wait a minute. Here's the overall market, and here are my, sources for the United States, for Hampton Roads or whatever. This is how many people, what racial demographic or buyer demographic or something else. What Bill's talking about is creating that social persona of your customer. And then your secondary research is basically there kind of like it was in a high school essay, when you had to have sources for your stuff. Well, your source is your actual people, but in a bigger picture, you're proving, well, wait a minute, I picked the right number of people because they fit in this market.
Got it. So the secondary market research just confirms your customer persona and what you actually see during your primary market.
I don't know
research.
about confirms, but backs
But
it up.
that- right, validates
Gives
it.
you
Okay.
some validation.
Okay.
And there's a great resource for this here locally, and I'm sure there's one in Virginia Beach. I just haven't run across it. At Selden Library's Business Research
Yes.
Center, they've got some great secondary market research sources, and you can walk in there and say, here's my market. And that assistant's going to say, okay, go look at these 5 documents.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Keep in mind too, and here, that's just a great way and a great example of a firm that is in the market that continues to do this. Keep in mind for me, well, we'll see it here in just a minute. Some of you will be selling business to business and some of you will be selling to government, in which case I really wanted to break down to actual list. I think you actually can get to the point where you know where you are going in order to make sales calls and do that. So remember, the objective here is to create a commercially viable product or service offering. And the basic process is doing your marketing research, whether it be primary or secondary, hopefully in tandem. We define your products and services. And in the process of doing this, you'll create knowledge of your benefits and features for a customer, and you'll begin to gain some knowledge on of pricing and what people are willing to pay because you're looking at what they're already doing. Then we walk through the secondary side. We can put numbers on an overall market knowledge. Investors generally are interested in that, but they will very quickly want you to be able to break that down to the actual target and the size of the market and how you will get into it. Don't talk to investors without telling them that you have done some analysis of the competition and what you will run into, because they will not find your proposition believable. And keep in mind, when you look at the competitive element, these are folks that are already in the market and they are who you will go against. And frankly, knowledge of this can give you a very good idea of what your potential pricing strategies are there. Do these 5 things and your marketing, sales, and promotional strategy will fall into place. You will learn the customer experience and how to get to your customers and the way that you're going to be able to do that. And then in conjunction with competition, your pricing strategy will be able to take fold. And then next week, we'll talk about the various ways that you can think through that as you gain that knowledge. So once you do all of that, the idea is a product market fit and a customer experience. I actually like to do process charts to tell me step by step how I'm going to make sure that my customer falls in love with buying my product or services. I use this definition of a brand There are many definitions of the brand, so there's no right of this. This has just held me in good stead working with people over the years. Okay, gotcha. So remember, the brand is a promise of a customer experience. That means you want it to be replicatable so that people learn what to expect from you. It becomes consistent, and it allows you a competitive advantage in the marketplace. That for me has been the best definition of a brand I have been able to apply to virtually any type of business. And in the end, customers either want to save money, make money, they want you to fill a need or one, or you can sometimes create a need or one. It is interesting, the folks who come up with something that the market didn't conceive of. But if you're engaging with customers, there's a good chance that you'll make sure this doesn't turn into something that nobody wants, but maybe a really unique product or service that fills a niche, as the person was talking about earlier. Any number of strategies for customer experience. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Some of you may have a brand new idea or technology for a niche market or otherwise. I call that a distinctive competence. You might be able to engage intellectual property, which creates a barrier to entry, which will certainly get the interest of investors, and hopefully it's a sizable market that you can grow into. A firm I think we all know, Qualcomm, is a very, very large organization that was a Silicon Valley startup. They use patented technologies, and there are many small biotech startup ventures. Actually, I think we have one in the group that create medicines and medical equipment. And this is innovation directed at a target market that we know needs the equipment or the drug or the pharmaceutical or the medical process that's being developed. These are usually, if they work, highly profitable businesses, very good gross margins and things like that. And these are generally what I call high growth opportunities. Platform businesses, these are the proverbial TikTok, Netflix, Facebook elements where they essentially create the means of connection. They actually have to find the folks that will come to the website, and then the people who want to use it. Facebook and TikTok turn that into a platform that monetizes it by advertising, and so do a lot of the platform businesses out there. So these are technology delivery systems. Generally, they can be protected with some intellectual property, including trademarking their business, and they can be very profitable if they work.
Can you?
Sure.
One of the important points on this one is that they, generally speaking, when you're a platform business, you are not the primary producer of the product line that you're selling. It's usually selling a product that's made by somebody else. It may be your design, and the full patent may be yours. But generally speaking, a platform business does not own the production facilities, and therefore it's a relatively lower capitalization for investment.
Just an excellent example that Jim just said, and I could really bring that home. Think of Amazon. Amazon does not, their stores, for example, don't create anything. They allow people to bring that to market. They have created the means of connection or the system that will deliver it to market. And that's just a perfect example Jim gave you. So they're the means of connection. And of course, I think you all know their customer experience, the ease of use is pretty good. So it's a nice product fit that really gives you an excellent example of what a platform business is like. We're good there, Tiffany? Nobody? That's great. Combined activities. This is when you combine, you come up with a number of features and benefits, and then you put them together in a unique component that creates competitive advantage. I think we spoke to this with Brian Owens last week. IKEA is a good example of this. In the beginning, they competed against standard furniture manufacturers and very large retailers. Most of them did not believe people would build their own furniture. They gained economies of scale by having very, very large stores centrally located, first over in Europe and then in the US. And then they have a nice reinforcement of activities that allow them to deliver well-designed furniture at a lower cost that you put together. And that gives them a competitive advantage in terms of price when they compete against the standard furniture manufacturers and retailers. Interesting, they are some of the most profitable, IKEA is one of the most profitable furniture manufacturers, or whatever you would call them. And as you can see, they charge lower prices and actually have higher margins by virtue of putting this together. And you can see the means that they did that. I have seen any number of small businesses be able to come up with these unique configurations, often for niche markets that we may never hear of, but can build very, very viable and profitable ventures for the original founder and for the management team. More traditional models are a total solution provider. You have a customer base, you develop a business model that meets all of their needs, so you become a one-stop shop. You may actually do this with contractors, but a good example is these are IT service firms. If you look at the Inc. 500 small growing firms, there are always a large number of IT service firms who have managed to put together a total solution, IT solution. I know this firm and have met them down in Atlanta. Baldwin Richardson Foods is a firm that actually helps firms develop new ingredients for their foods. And they start at ideation and go all the way through commercialization and package. So they're a one-stop shop for new food developments. The low-cost strategy, of course, is the Walmart strategy. I don't advise this for most small businesses because my experience is the only way for this strategy to work as a customer experience is you have to be a low-cost producer. That generally will require size. Nevertheless, if we have someone who wants to go down this path, we will certainly listen to it. But and I've seen some small businesses do a pretty good job of that, like G & Company Apparel in a very, very niche market. These folks do accessories for men's fashion. That's all they do. And they've done a pretty good job about developing a online marketplace that works from there.
This is sometimes called commodity product.
Yes.
Commodity product provision or commodity product pricing. And if you hear somebody say that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a good business idea. It's that you're probably not going to be the primary seller of that product.
Yeah.
A commodity product strategy generally is that you're going to be selling to wholesalers. You're going to be selling to the big box stores. You're going to be looking to them as your channel to market.
And Jim just fed us right into the final slides here on channels, so we'll go from there. Some of you may have simple businesses where you create an experience for the business. These are terribly hard to differentiate, and they often create competitors. But nevertheless, these are substantial markets often, and you may be one of the small businesses that develops a solid smaller business. You all can think of these. I think of these in my own line of work. Civil and most engineering service firms often have multiple competitors. All of us have the need for HVAC contractors, and there are plenty of those in any locale, but obviously some of them do quite well and make money. Many of us may use investment service firms for a variety of those. Not a great deal of distinctive difference between these firms, but markets that are large enough, and if you can create a consistent customer experience, you can make money at them and have success. Even the folks that get more precise than that, more competitive, or the winning moves, these are the folks who go after business day in and day out. They're very tactical. They always know they're dealing with competitors, and they're trying to provide solutions to their customer base and the ones with the most pain at any given time. Good examples of these are franchise operations, highly competitive business, government contractors, and these can be large and small.
Subcontractors mostly, right?
Actually, that's a very good point Jim makes. When I'm talking about small businesses, often the government contractors, you are in a subcontracting element. I don't want to discount the occasional small business that finds a niche market that could be a prime, but Jim's point is well taken there. And then my favorite, read the book, Blue Ocean Strategy, eliminate, reduce, raise, and create. These are the folks we were talking about last week. We actually, Brian Owens brought up Yellowtail Wine, where there was a whole industry that said this was the way you have to do it. And these entrepreneurs got together and they eliminated a lot of the complexity, a lot of the snobbery associated with wine drinking. They actually went through traditional food outlets, I should say food, sorry about the typo, grocery stores, and they actually increased the number of people or customers. They created a market for people who didn't traditionally use wine and didn't want to get involved with all that snobbery, and have created a international business out of it. The other one you will see in the book, you all may have seen Cirque du Soleil. This is the acrobatic shows that you can see in theaters. When this started, the original two founders actually were circus performers, and they went in and redid the circus business model. They eliminated animal and big name entertainment. They just find acrobats on stage. They don't pay the big dollars associated with that. They did create content for acrobats and things like that. And the result was a price of a ticket that was less than it cost you to go to the business. But of course, their business was more profitable because their costs were lower. And they actually do these shows in Las Vegas venues and local theaters around the country now. But a very good example of someone who rethought an entire business, created a better value for the customer with a lower lower ticket price, but actually was able to deliver it more profitably because he did not spend big money as the circus business had done. And I'm sure there still must be circuses out there, but I don't think that there's very many of them anymore. So shows you how good that model was. So in the end, products and services are what are you going to offer the market? Who is your customer? Where do they find the value? And then you want to be able to deliver this at an appropriate cost. Remember those costs you are tracking, because at some point we have to build that first year projection, and it has to feed into the 5-year projection that Jim laid out for you. And your cost have to be built into your projections so we can make sure that you can make money. We want to make sure you can get paid for it, and we want to make sure the market potential has a sufficient number of customers to be able to make the business viable for you and to generate an investment grade return.
This slide,
Sure.
this slide is the basis for creating a investment ready business plan. If you can answer all these questions and they make sense, and it's based on common sense, rational bases, then you're going to get past the worst questions that any investor can ask you, and you're going to attract more investors. Very important slide. Sorry,
Jim,
Bill.
and then I want to lay over your thing back here, Jim. So I'm going to offer to that. But the other part too is, as you work through this, as I said, I'm going to borrow from Jim from last week too, is if you do this work, it will become intuitive when you sit down the investor. You can grab them from the start. So a number of you have relatively complicated business models. There's nothing wrong with that, but we need to think through the product and service so it becomes intuitive, so that people can grasp what you're trying to do and they can get comfortable with understanding it and making a investment in it. Once we have your product and services, we need to define your market, okay? And you need to be able to define your market with regards to numbers and actual customer count that we can build into a projection. This is the area of total addressable market, total available market, and the service obtainable market. They call these TAM, you call it TAM, SAM, and SOM, okay? And so here are the definitions. The total addressable market, and this is a straightforward, is the total available market in your effort. The revenue opportunity is if you had no competition. There is no such market, but there are many studies that define what everybody is spending on a market. And that's a good number to be able to put in the marketing section of the pitch deck that Jim showed you in week one. So it starts off, it creates, it's usually a number that can be in the millions and billions of dollars. And it says initially, okay, at least you're thinking about something that has a large market potential. The service available market, or the SAM, is the addressable market that is served by your company products or services. So you can see we take that whole and we begin to dice it up into a number that you can say to investor, you think you can get at. And then we do the SOM, the service obtainable market, which is generally a market share number, okay, that can be realistically achieved. This third one is the most important part of the discussion with your investor, because this is where they will either start to believe that you have done your homework, or they'll take umbrage that you are producing numbers that are not reachable. And this is it in graphic form. You see, we go from TAM to SAM to SOM. And SOM is the obtainable market element that will end up in your sales projection. And that's just a good pictorial of that. I think, Jim, I actually borrowed this from the first time you did this cohort, and I've just used this slide over and over again. Here's an example of what Jim was saying earlier of the secondary market research. I just pulled this. We have access at the SBDC to IBIS World, and I just pulled out the digital advertising market. And so you can see here, IBS World says the total addressable market being spent in the continental United States right now is $19.8 billion. But not everybody does everything. So you can see here all the available markets that people specialize in. Search engine optimization, not exactly. This is the world of Google and things like that. Certainly banner advertising, video advertising is a very, very large market that has some excellent small businesses in it, locally as well as nationally. And then you can see all of the other things that digital advertising can break down to into mobile classified directories, although these are very small elements. Once you can do this work, you can see if you have this number and you were going to be in the video advertising market, you might be able to apply this number to start to target your market, and then lay over the things Tiffany and Jim were talking about earlier. Well, maybe you're only going to exist in Hampton Roads, and so that market will only be so large in that particular market. So you can see in the end, this becomes simple math. Have the total addressable market times what the logical percentage is that you're having now, and then lay over the unique elements of where you will attack the market. And usually that's geography, or it's a demographic profile, particularly those of you who will address an online market where you're not limited by geographies. But a very good example of a standard market and how you move from the top of the TAM market to SAM. In the end, I tell people that if I have a real thorough marketing and sales proposal and I've defined my overall and target market, when I engage a customer, I know I will be able to be comfortable, because my goal is a list or a demographic or a persona profile. Persona profiles are used when you're trying to define online markets now, although I still think it falls back on demographics. But in the end, I want a list. I want to be able to tell my investor and the folks in my management team, this is who we're going after. If you're selling business to business, that list can be quite real. It can be name, address, telephone number, and those sorts of things. If it's a government contract, those things are definable. If you are dealing with individuals or businesses to a business to consumer element, you need a demographic profile that can be laid over a population so that we can get some idea of the number of people we're talking about. And then we can start assessing things like the amount of money they might spend with you, or your pricing strategy, in order to build a revenue projection. So remember, the goal is a list or a demographic or persona profile as we get to the SOM area. Go ahead. Question?
Yeah. So Dr. Jen says, I'm launching in the US to start, but after we get FDA clearance, we want to be global in 2 years. So should I present the market to investors as global or US?
I would present the total available market as global because she is creating a medical service, and that I'm betting, Dr. Jen, that your market is readily definable in terms of people who will be able to use your solution. But I would define it internationally, okay? But I would very quickly get to your phased approach as to how you're going to roll it out. Now, you said you want to be throughout the US in 2 years, and I'll yield to Jim as to whether or not that's feasible. But so I would define the international market, but I think the phased SOM approach will be how quickly you can move out into the market. And there's where investors and people like Jim Franklin can be very, very helpful, because the realism of that projection can be brought to bear, and you can debate back and forth or put strategies in place that give you the best chance to achieve that goal.
Yeah, Jim, thank you
Yeah.
for that question, because it leads me to a piece of advice about this. We all tend to get overwhelmed by numbers. We also have many different definitions of these 3 simple market categories or market defining categories. The important thing is up there at the top, overall market to target market. And Jen, your question is wonderful because it breaks out it's a very good illustration of that total market, that total available market globally. What is your product going to fit? How many patients or providers or hospitals or whatever are available to buy that good? But that target market, almost always, I love a target market that's presented to me in phases of when am I going to enter? I'm going to sell everybody in the United States, but in the United States, I'm going to focus geographically or demographically or something like that to enter, then phase 1, then phase 2. And at that point, we're going to start spending marketing money on global market entry. And we're going to do that at the, say, Q3 of year 2 or something like that. To an investor, it says, man, they figured this out. I'm not going to have to put any more money in. This thing's going international.
So
I
make
hope
sure
that answers your question.
that's just an excellent example. Is Dr. Jen acceptable, or does she have any follow-up or anything?
Not yet, no.
Good.
No, thank you.
Numbers and methods overwhelm you. Common sense leads to a definable market that fits your product and lets you target sales.
And maybe just listening to Jim there, common sense is a better word than intuitive, but both of those are important characteristics, I think. Once you have done this and you walk through this, your channels to your customer and all of that will become very apparent. There are lots of business canvases that always include channels and things like that. But my experience is if you walk through products and services and you start to define your market, the channels by which you will reach that market become apparent. And it's the way you deliver the value proposition. No magic to channels. Actually, this list could probably be expanded to 30 or 40 things, but obviously many of you will be selling over the internet. Many of you may be retailers or may sell your products to retailers. This is the wholesaler aspect that Jim was talking about. Some of you may build your own stores. Some of you may be a wholesaler in terms of where you actually deliver your product, and then they're the ones who reach out to the various markets. And then there are all sorts of other intermediaries, agents, partners, resellers that play. Some of you may, particularly if you're selling business to business or business to government, will need a sales team to be able to go out and engage that market directly. So my experience is that you do the work on products and services, and the marketing and sales element and the channels will become very apparent as to what will create the best value for your venture. The element talked about vertical and horizontal markets. I'm not terribly concerned about this, but I did want to answer the mail because you can run into investors who might talk this way. The difference between a vertical market and a horizontal market has always been pretty straightforward to me. You see it at the top layer. Vertical market offers products and services to an industry or some specific customer group that has specialized needs. Hospitals are a good example of this. The financial markets generally break down this way. Aircraft manufacturing is a vertical market. You are either doing that and not much else. And the whole supply chain tends to be located somewhere along the path of getting a airliner built. The benefits of vertical markets is they're focused. So you get to a very specific audience for maximum effectiveness. You can see here, marketing campaigns tend to be more straight line, although I doubt that they're less expensive, but nevertheless, that's what the literature said. This is the place where you can often develop specialized products and services that can find niche markets and niche pricing. And I always thought that was a very, very good place for small businesses when they're starting out to be looking. Horizontal markets are just broader. So this is a market in which a product or service meets a wide range of buyers across different industries. A good example here is Amazon, we talked about earlier, or you can think of office supply retailers. Individuals need office supplies, businesses need office supplies. Virtually, it's a very, very large horizontal market that goes over several different places. Its benefits is generally there's higher demand just because you're going across multiple. And so you have a bigger total available market at the start. It will then depend on your niche and your elements there. You might be able to design different pricing models. There are lots of businesses, conglomerates that exist in horizontal markets, and they're always fighting the war between the parts of their business that are more profitable than other models. But you can have different pricing models as a result of that. And you always have the ability to optimize products or services more easily because you have more markets that it might fit.
And if I might,
Yeah,
offer
anytime
a
in there because
little
I
experiential thing, and you know you're in a horizontal market when you have the opportunity to sell your product or service at both the wholesale and the retail level. So you can go direct to customers, or you can sell to Walmart, or you can, that's kind of the definition of a horizontal market. A vertical market means my target is Walmart. I'm going to them. I'm not going direct customer. I don't have reach or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me because wholesalers are the folks who are supposed to give access to those broad markets that Jim is talking about. So I like the idea that your target market ends up being wholesalers as a definition of that.
And why do investors care about the difference?
Yeah,
between
that's a good
verticals and
question.
horizontal?
Yeah.
We care because if you have defined yourself within a vertical market, we hope that you've done the competitive research to make sure that you have some kind of competitive advantage in that vertical. Okay. If you're in a horizontal market, we hope that you have the breadth and depth and ability to appeal to a wide range of customers. So do you see how you'd spend marketing money differently? You can target market in a vertical, or you're going to have to spend a lot of market. I mean, you're going to have to do a Super Bowl ad in a horizontal market.
Oh, good. Very good. Very good. Those were the elements today. I did want you to know from use resources I put here. My friend Subhar Nayar did a nice little 20-minute presentation on value proposition and design. Now, he has a lot more hard and fast do's and don'ts, and he's a revenue producing officer for 3 technology firms as well as an SBDC consultant. So I would simply take that. For me, I would generally trust your instincts as you engage the market, but it's worth hearing what he has to say. And once again, it walks you through the process that I had to go through in just 5 or 10 minutes today. So I wanted you all to have that because I think it's a nice product along with design thinking and with lean marketing activity that can help you develop the features and benefits as you determine your products and services. Value line, this one is a business model. This is Osterwalder's business model canvas, and we've spent a lot of time in value proposition and product development today. That feeds, you get this part right, and it starts to feed customer relationships, key elements. I guarantee you, you do this right, and you spend the time developing your products and services, the partners that might be helpful, the costs that you will incur, the channels will become very, very apparent. I actually think when Osterwalder wrote his book, the value proposition is one of the first 2 or 3 things that he touches base on, because none of this gets started without a product or service that you can offer the market. It's the same with the other one. This is just brand oriented, but you start with your value proposition to the customer, and it walks through what we have talked about today. So these align very nicely with those of you that have been, I know a number of you have been using business model canvases, and there's nothing wrong with that approach. I just want you to know that that's the fit in terms of value proposition design as you develop your products and services. In the end, I want everybody, as you do this, to keep in mind your first year projection and the 5-year profile that Jim laid out from you for the first week. As you engage the market, you will begin to find out what it's going to take to produce this, the expenses and the promotional things that you will have to spend money on, and those should become line items in your operating expenses, and then we'll be able to project those out through your first year. Next week, we'll get into pricing strategy, and we'll expand on TAM, SAM, and SOM, and we'll do more about projecting your sales capability. And then ultimately, as we get down here, we will want to know when your business reaches break even and profitability. And my charge to you is to begin looking at this first year projection, because once we can get 1 year in, starting to work on year 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th tend to do with phases and your next steps as you garner more and more market share and increase your top level sales. So it's my experience, particularly for those of you in startup mode, that you look at this first year. Also, as Jim was saying earlier, it gets into timing. There are only 12 months in a year, and there's a lot of things to do to get your business off the ground. And if you start thinking of it in 30-day segments, you'll be realistic about your approach to developing a successful venture. The vision description we talked about last week. I hope we spent enough time on owners' salaries. We certainly don't want you to ignore that. And with that, we should be to questions.